Thank you. I want to ask you to do something, which is to contemplate the thoughts that come in your mind when I say the word Africa. Just think for a second. What thoughts come through your mind when I say Africa? My suspicion is that you're thinking poverty, disease, HIV/AIDS, death, conflict, genocide, and maybe even the last king of Scotland. I submit to you that that's one perspective. And it's a perspective that has been influenced by the narrative that's in the media all around us. If you ask me, what do I think of Africa? I think, well, 2 months ago, I saw a consortium of European energy companies ready to invest $500 billion to capture, trap, and sell the solar energy in the Sahara Desert. Opportunity. I look at a continent of 900 million customers, entrepreneurs. Can you guys survive on $1 a day? You know, we pander this thing that, oh, these are people who live on $1 a day. What entrepreneurship does it take for you to live on $1 a day? We have entrepreneurs, but we don't celebrate that. The perspectives that we hold on Africa influence the decisions that we make and how we relate to people, to churches in Africa. And as leaders today, it is my honor and privilege to try and deconstruct the narrative that has been going around about Africa, how people perceive it, and how we ought to perceive it going forward. Before I do that, I'd just like to clarify on a couple of issues. One, I'm going to talk about aid and how people present aid as a solution to Africa's problems, i.e. handouts. But I'd like to separate aid from the humanitarian assistance that people give when there are natural disasters and things like that. But I also like to talk about Africa. Given the time I have, I don't have time to talk about individual countries, so I'll speak of Africa. I appreciate it's 53 countries, 900 million people. But I'd just like to discuss it within that context of the continent. Now, in addressing the question of how do we best handle the solutions to Africa's problem, I think we need to go back a little bit in history. On November 15th, 1884, the German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck called a meeting of 13 European leaders in Berlin. It was known as the Conference of Berlin. And these guys basically sat around the table and said, okay, this is Africa. Now, how are we going to formalize and regulate colonialism? So the British said, well, I'll take Kenya. And Uganda looks lovely. And the Germans said, we'll take Namibia. The Portuguese said, we'll take Mozambique, Angola, and so on and so forth. This was what was known as a scramble for Africa, the petitioning of a continent. Look, you guys, you got to see some of those borders. It's like someone just got a ruler and just drew one long line and said, okay, this looks like a good border for Sudan. I mean, communities were split. Families were separated. I mean, you have a scenario where in Uganda, which is next to Kenya, you have a member of parliament, a minister in the cabinet in Uganda, having a brother next door in Kenya who is the vice president. Can you figure that out? I mean, two brothers who were split by a border. One's a member of parliament, a cabinet minister in Uganda, the other is a vice president in Kenya. You have a situation where by 1902, 90% of Africa was under colonial rule. How were the economies structured? The economies were structured to export raw commodities. We produce tea, we produce coffee, we produce cocoa. We don't process any of that. We just export it raw. That has been one of the defining aspects of our economies, why we've never been able to create value and why economies have been in the doldrums till now. Africa is a continent that produces products they don't consume. So they export these raw commodities. And they import and consume products that they do not produce. They haven't added value to. This is a backdrop of my company, Good African Coffee, which I founded in 2003, to try and address how African producers fitted into the global coffee supply chain. So what happened? We said it's about time that we invite people into a new conversation about how Africans are the people who are best placed to solve their problems through hard work, through innovation, and through bringing quality products to the global market. Great idea. So I said, what are we going to do? We're going to train the farmers to produce quality products that we bring to market. Everybody says, oh, some of the products coming out of Africa are not necessarily the best. So let's work with the farmers, train them. We drove 500 kilometers to Mount Rwenzori, which is in the western part of the country, to meet these farmers and to try and convince them to come into the program. We had little money, small staff, very little to go along with. When we got there, we talked to the farmers, and the farmers were suspicious. I mean, they said, look, what's all this talk about coming to train us? 50% profit share? And you're black. The guys who normally come here talking to us about change don't look like you. You're not an NGO. You're not driving a big Suburban 4x4. We don't trust you. I mean, I'm a development economist. I thought having a noble cause gets instant, immediate buy-in. But here were my own people. You know, there's this lady farmer, Rosemary. She had a little stubby finger. She would come up and go, you young people, we don't trust you these days. How can you talk about helping us? What's your agenda? And you know, we've got 100 people, and I'm saying, Rosemary, can we have this discussion in the office privately? I mean, this is not how you encourage the rest of the farmers to come into the program. Spent 3 hours doing a verbal due diligence on us. But you know, the great thing was the next day she brought 2,000 pounds of coffee into the office. Finally, farmer by farmer, village by village, they bought into the vision, and they became what we have now as 14,000 coffee suppliers into our company. Now, candid talk, when you don't have much money and you have a strong vision, and the integrity of candid talk is not just to share with people the truth of the circumstance. Integrity is actually being truthful about what you need to do to get out of a difficult situation. So we said, look, we don't have the money. We don't have all the resources that NGOs would have. But what we have is a commitment to change the conversation as to how people look at us as Africans, to change the narrative that we're a basket case and all we need is handouts, whereas what we really should be doing is working together and helping ourselves get out of poverty. We came to this issue of trade and not aid because for a long time, Africa has had a lot of well-meaning but misguided advocates for aid. A lot of people with the hearts in their right places, but who advocate aid because they somehow believe that through handouts to these really sad situations, they're going to bring about change. But how can that be? Look at the United States. 200 years of trade-generated growth and prosperity. Look at the United Kingdom. Look at China. Look at India. Look at Southeast Asia. There is no country in the world that has developed through handouts. So why is Africa different? Why should people somehow think that handouts is what's going to develop Africa? We use trade as an engine for growth because it's part of economic doctrine. For the last 300 years, economists have proven that trade is the only sustainable way to take societies out of poverty and create transformational empowerment of their communities. Period. So the next time someone comes and says, look, I need to give a handout for Africa, say, excuse me, no. We need to find ways we can relate with people on the continent to get them to help themselves, trade themselves and their communities out of poverty. So in 2005, In 2005, we launched our fast coffee brand in the United Kingdom. Boy, 14 trips to the United Kingdom from Uganda. 1, 2, 3. I got my wife here. She can testify. 14 trips on best behavior, the best English accent. Good morning. After one kind of example, after one meeting, one of the buying directors of a big supermarket said, "Jumping giraffes, that's an extraordinary presentation." 20 out of 20. So I thought, okay, do we have the deal? No, you need to come back again. So I'd go back home and Jackie would say, all right, enough of the stories. Have we got the deal or not? No. 14 trips. You see, even when you can make the case, when you can make the arguments, and you try and pursue the vision, these non-tariff barriers seem to be in the way, blocking your progress. That's why Africa today produces and contributes just 2% of global trade merchandise. Just 2%. And if that's not enough, having buying directors who don't believe that you're capable of bringing a product to market, you've got the whole media thing. So I'll do these interviews on BBC, CNN, and they'll say, oh, wonderful stuff that you're doing in Uganda. Well done. Now tell us, how is the situation in Zimbabwe going to affect you? What am I supposed to do with Zimbabwe? I'm Ugandan. Oh, but aren't you from Africa? Yeah, but I'm Ugandan. I'm not Zimbabwean. I mean, these perceptions are so hardwired in our minds that every time we look at Africa, we don't see the opportunities. We just see the problem. You guys need to change how you view this continent. When you look at it, you look at consumers, you look at partners, you look at people you can have relationships with. As an African entrepreneur, what am I looking for? I'm not looking to be pitied. I'm looking for the same equal opportunities that an American, a Chinese, an Indian, an English entrepreneur is looking for. Markets and the opportunity to exploit them to create value. I'm not coming here looking for someone to give me a handout. I'm looking for someone to give me market share on the shelves. I'm looking for Walmart to call me and say, we've got shelf space for you. And we'll do the rest of the work. I'm not looking for someone to feel pity and say, oh, we're so sorry for you, poor African. What brings you here? A little bit of help? How may we oblige and be of help to you? No, we want to do business. There is a continent full of entrepreneurs, teeming and waiting to come and do business with the rest of the world. We need to change the conversation. We need to change the narrative. Now, very quickly, this aid issue, how has it been sustained as an argument in the face of all the evidence that it hasn't been effective? Between 1970 and 2000, Africa has received $400 billion, United States dollars, worth of aid. This graph just shows you the correlations between GDP growth and aid as a percentage of gross national income. And you can see the point at which aid as a ratio of gross national income being the highest, 1995, was the same year and the same period that GDP per capita was at its lowest. I mean, look at it. If aid was at its highest level in 1995 and the growth of the economy was at its lowest, that just shows us that it's not effective. It's not being effective to transform the economy. Why isn't it effective? Because aid is really not aid. It's poorly structured, it's fungible, which means when you bring it into the economy, the country prioritizes other things that it was going to spend its own money on because it's receiving this aid. It's insincere and it's conditional. People don't just give aid, they attach conditionalities to it. You will do this, that, and the other, and we'll give you this money. So you have remote control, management of African societies and economies by donors, your taxpayers. Number two, aid actually undermines accountability. It doesn't make it better. It undermines it. Why? We give the example of Tanzania. Tanzania, last year, wrote 2,400 donor reports and had 1,000 annual meetings with the donors. That's a lot of time to spend in donor meetings, talking about the impact of the aid that is being received. We're going to spend time doing businesses, creating IT companies, creating innovation labs, getting people to produce and to package their products and bring it to markets. We need to have people creating jobs, paying taxes, and developing their societies. You have a situation like aid, you create a chronic dependency. Most African economies are so dependent on aid handouts that their national budgets seek donors for about 40 to 45% of the expenditure. That doesn't just create a chronic dependency, it undermines the integrity and the dignity of the recipient countries. We need a new thinking. We need to change the conversation. We need to get people thinking, what is the impact of our compassion? How do we affect change by being compassionate, at the same time retaining the dignity to those we're showing our compassion? You need to paint a different picture. You need to have a portrait of Africa as a continent of consumers, a continent of innovators, a continent of great products, a place that has been blessed with soils that you can grow anything. A continent where real partnerships will bring sustainable community transformation. A continent where people will be treated equally, and through that equal treatment, they will be inspired to do something for themselves. The problem we had when we went to try and develop these farmer networks was because people have lost faith in themselves. When you keep telling someone you can't do anything for yourself, but to be handed out through kindness, that's what they begin to think. That's why when they looked at us, we didn't look like an NGO. We were local. And guys are saying, you can't help us. Help has always come from outside the country. So the people on the continent have developed a belief that the best people who can help them are those who come from outside. The conversation has to change. And I want to salute Bill Hybels and his team for inviting an African to talk about these issues. Because how many Africans do you guys see on CNN and all these other cable television networks talking about these issues? You see well-meaning guys who don't look like me. Doesn't mean their heart is not in the right place, but it just shows you if in the dialogue, in the discussion, in the debate, the Africans are not represented, how will we truly know what works or what doesn't work? You can make a difference today. You can go out and you can buy an African garment. You can buy good African coffee. Sorry, I wasn't punting there. Good African tea. You can buy African music. You can buy a product that is going to employ someone, keep a business going, allow us to impact our communities, and bring about change. You see, in Africa, sharing and caring for our communities is not something we recognize as social corporate responsibility. It's something that's rooted in our African value system. Can you imagine a society that has very little health care, very little education system? How do people get by? By stretching out and helping one another. Not because it's something that we look at as social responsibility, but because it's ingrained in our heritage as a people. So if we do business with you, we will take care of our people. And the best way to help us take care of ourselves is through trade and not aid. My prayer today is that you will reconstruct the narrative that's been in your minds. The narrative that says kindness must be demonstrated through handouts. No. The best kindness you can demonstrate is by helping people help themselves. That's how you, as a world developed, That's how you as a world developed. That's how the most prosperous and advanced economies developed. That's all Africa needs. The opportunity to prove that we can bring quality products to market and help ourselves through trade and not aid. God bless you.